So today we are talking about the genitive case in German. This is going to take you through every single thing you will ever need to know about the genitive case. And if you want to know anything whatsoever, this is the place to be. I'm going to teach it all to you in one presentation, hopefully in about an hour or so is about how long this is going to take us. And we're going to go through every single little thing that you would ever possibly need. So yeah. Let's go ahead and get started into this. First things first, we are going to check out this presentation that I put together. Over on my website, germanwithantrim.com, you can find worksheets and video scripts and MP3 downloads of my videos and all kinds of other fun stuff. So if you haven't already done that, go ahead and check that out. And if you're one of those people who likes to follow people on social medias, I've got those social medias as well, just like all of those other people. Today, we already mentioned, today is the 7th of May. It is 2:30 in the afternoon here in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is Chicago time, and we are going to talk about the genitive case. So, if you are looking for additional materials, you want to practice this stuff once you've gotten done with this presentation today, you get through this hour worth of stuff and you're like, all right, I want to test this out and see if I know anything about this myself. I'm going to have worksheets and other stuff that I put up, extra materials for this after this live stream is done. I will put these together. It usually takes me about a week to get things done after the live stream is done. And then once that's done, I will put that up on my website and you can download it from there for $5. Or if you're one of those people who likes those super chat things off of YouTube, you can do that. And I will then have your email address from YouTube and I will send you the materials once they are ready. So $5 either in super chat or after the presentation is over, and give me about a week and I will have those things online and you can buy them from germanwithantrim.com. Topics for today, the things that you are going to learn about the genitive case. First of all, genitive possession, which if you didn't know, that's the main reason that the genitive case is used, and so we will be talking about that in depth today. Then we'll have to talk about genitive definite articles and then indefinite articles, followed by the adjectives that you use with those definite and indefinite articles, as well as adjectives that you use without having an article on it at all. Then we get into genitive prepositions, as they're used quite widely nowadays. Then we're going to talk in depth a little bit about these weak German nouns. They've been in my accusative presentation. They were in my dative presentation. We also have to talk about them again in the genitive case because they are slightly different in the genitive case than they are in the other cases. Genitive demonstrative pronouns are not the same as definite articles. This is the first case that we get that changes things significantly, and so we have to talk about demonstrative or relative pronouns in this. Then we have genitive verbs. Yes, they do exist. That is a thing. And if you're curious about that, you're going to have to stick around towards the end of this. I finally get into genitive verbs. Then we get into indefinite time. This is time that you use with, like, one day my prince will come. That's eines Tages. Anyway, the point is that's genitive case as well. And then we get into miscellaneous genitive phrases, which is just phrases that happen to use genitive for whatever reason. If you haven't been paying attention to the color coding so far in the other presentations, we have nominative in red, accusative in green, dative in blue, and genitive in purple. So we're going to be spending most of our time talking about the purple today. Anytime I have a chart, it is in the order of masculine, feminine, neuter, and then the plural. I know that some people try and put the masculine and neuter next to each other on charts, so I just like to make sure that that is clear before we get into it. So, as I mentioned before, the genitive case is mostly used, its primary use is for the possessive forms of things in German. So, basically what's going to happen is, in English, we add an S with an apostrophe to it in order to make something possessive. So for instance, the example I have down at the bottom, Bob's boat. Bob is the one that owns the boat, and so we put an apostrophe followed by an S in order to indicate that that is Bob's boat, right? In German, it's basically the same thing. In fact, the reason that we have an S at the end of it in English is because of the German possessive here with the genitive case. But in German, we don't have the apostrophe, so it's just Bob's boat, which is exactly the same thing, Bob's boat, but we don't have an apostrophe here because German. If, however, the name of the person that owns something in this ends with either an S or a Z in their name, that would mean like Klaus, for instance, you just put an apostrophe at the end of the word. You do not add an extra one like you do in English, where it's Klaus's house. That sounds odd, but that's the way that it's done in English. In German, you just put an apostrophe and you do not add anything else. So it's just Klaus' Haus. And the apostrophe is supposed to tell you that that S there is possessive as well. Now, of course, if you're going to use possession without a person's name, you're going to have to get into the genitive case a little bit deeper. And these are usually translated as of something, or like the color of the shirt, for instance, is the example that I have there. And those are going to be like sentences that you could usually use, or phrases that you could usually use with von. Now you're going to take the von out of the sentence and use it without that. And whenever you take out the von, that thing after that other noun there, in this case des Hemdes, is now genitive. So die Farbe von dem Hemd, which is the color of the shirt, is the exact same thing as die Farbe des Hemdes, which still means the color of the shirt. So it's the exact same thing, still means possession, still shows you that the color belongs to the thing in purple here, which is the shirt, okay? And that is des Hemdes. Now, if you're wondering what the articles look like in full, they look like this. Generally, definite articles is what they're called. They generally are translated as the, as they identify some object, but not just an object, but the object, right? Now, these are usually used for demonstrative pronouns and relative pronouns as well, with the exception of dative plural. And then once we get into the genitive case, they don't fit that pattern at all. The demonstrative or relative pronouns are completely different. So if you were thinking that you were going to get away with only learning one set of these words, that's not going to happen today. Now, once you get into the genitive case, we now have masculine being des. The feminine is now der, the neuter is des, and the plural is also der. So, des der, des der. So if you're following along with the mnemonic devices that I've given you in other videos, we have resse for the nominative, nesse for the accusative, mermen for the dative, and surser for the genitive. So, resse, nesse, mermen, surser. Definite articles aren't, these endings that we use here for these definite articles aren't always just on definite articles. They can also go on these words like diese, jeder, manche, solche, welche, alle. There's also jener. But all of those words have the same ending. So we still have dieses, dieser, dieses, and dieser for the endings on dies, for instance. Now, you may have noticed that whenever I had this slide here where we have an S in parentheses for the masculine and the neuter forms, that is definitely there for a reason. You noticed it in the first example I gave where it was des Hemdes. Des Hemdes is of the shirt. That Hemd had an extra ES at the end of it, and that's going to happen to any masculine or neuter noun in the German genitive case. So here's a couple of examples here. We have der Hut des Mannes. Der Hut des Mannes. The hat of the man. Now, in that sentence, or in that clause, I guess, we have mannes because man is the normal form. Now we're going to add es to the end of it because it only has one syllable. But in the second example here, die Farbe des Autos, die Farbe des Autos, we have just an S at the end of that one. And so we don't have to use an ES, it's just one S, because in this one we have two syllables, so auto, we have two syllables there, so we have just an S. So, long story short, one syllable, add ES, and then if it is more than one syllable, use an S at the end of it, okay? If you are using a feminine or a plural noun, do not use an S or ES at the end of any of these nouns. None of them do that, okay? So, for instance, we have die Farbe der Krawatte. Krawatte is a feminine noun, so we use here der Krawatte for the genitive, but we don't have anything added to the end of the noun because it's feminine and they just don't do that. Die Telefonnummer der Nachbarn, the telephone number of the neighbors. This one is plural, indicated by the N at the end of Nachbar, but it is der Nachbarn, and we do not have to add anything to the end of that. Okay? Now let's get into some examples in sentences and see how this is kind of all tied together. Die Ehefrau des Mannes gibt dem Sohn des Ehepaars den Schlüssel des Autos. So, I did this on purpose. I put genitive case sprinkled throughout the entire sentence because I wanted to make sure that you knew that genitive case doesn't necessarily have to be in a particular place in the sentence. It just has to be after the thing that is being possessed. So the thing that is owned, the thing that is being had in any of these sentences, okay? That's where the genitive case goes. So I use this in as many places as I possibly could in my example sentences. So for the first one, die Ehefrau des Mannes, the wife of the man. Of the man is the genitive case, that's why it's des Mannes. So yeah, now that we get into the the dative case with the dem Sohn, the thing that's after that is still genitive, des Ehepaars, so the son of the couple. And then when we get into the accusative case, den Schlüssel, the thing after that is still genitive, des Autos. Okay? So, long story short, genitive goes after the thing that is being possessed, the thing that is being had, the thing that is being owned in some way. Die Farbe des Kellers gefällt dem Mann des Hauses nicht. The color of the basement is not pleasing to the man. So we're talking about die Farbe des Kellers. In English, this is kind of the object of the sentence, but in German, this is still the subject, so the color of the basement. Gefällt is the verb to like, but also translated as to please. Dem Mann is dative here because it's the object of this dative verb gefallen, but then we get into the neuter form des Hauses for the house. Okay? Dem Mann des Hauses. Don't forget that it's only an S at the end of Keller because that's already got two syllables before we had that S there. So it's Keller, and then we add an S, Kellers. And then in house, house is only one syllable, so when we put it in the genitive case, it becomes des Hauses. Des Hauses. Few examples with feminine and plural things. Wir mieten den größten Konzertsaal der Stadt für die Geburtstagsparty der Frau. Wir mieten den größten Konzertsaal der Stadt für die Geburtstagsparty der Frau. So, in the first one, der Stadt, that's feminine and dative. The second one, der Frau, is, no, not dative. We're talking about genitive case here. What am I doing? Anyway, purple is genitive. So, der Stadt and der Frau, they're both in the genitive case. There we go. We'll get this eventually. Die Fragen der Prüfungen waren nicht sehr schwierig. The questions of the tests were not very difficult. This time we have a plural one, and again, in the genitive case, that's going to use der. Now we can get into some ein-word examples here. These are sometimes called ein-words, sometimes called indefinite articles, but these are basically a or an in English, and they are used to identify a non-specific thing. So not the, but a thing, okay? And as always, you can't use this in the plural form. That's not going to make any sense to say a books. So instead, we use here an asterisk and a K to indicate that it's something other than that, which I show in the next slide, okay? Nominative case, we had no ending E, no ending E. Accusative case, en, e, no ending E. Dative case, em, er, em, en. And then in the genitive case, as you would expect, sr, sr. So, eines, einer, eines, keiner. So, masculine, feminine, neuter, plural, same as before, right? There are also other words that act like indefinite articles, but aren't actually necessarily indefinite articles. So, for instance, mein, dein, sein, any of those possessive articles, and then also the negated word or the negative version of an ein word, so kein, that word that is used to negate nouns, that also counts as an ein word of sorts. Now, side note here, the possessive articles that are listed there are technically speaking genitive pronouns, but we generally don't call them that because there is also a way to use possessive pronouns as pronouns, which I'll get to here at the end of this presentation somewhere. So it's just a little bit odd that you can use this, but basically what happens is we have an ending here at the end of it that indicates the case and gender of the noun, and then the possessive itself, the mein, dein, sein, that part of it, those things indicate who it is that owns something. So that shows you genitive case, but we're showing genitive case in these examples through the ending that is on these words, not the fact that they're genitive pronouns. So ignore the fact that they're genitive pronouns for now and just identify them as indefinite articles or things that act like indefinite articles. Examples of how to use these in sentences. Here we start off with Der Frau meines Bruders verkauft dem Sohn eines Lehrers die Tür eines Käfers. The wife of my brother is selling the son of a teacher the door of a beetle. Yeah, it's an odd sentence, but it works. So, genitive case after the nominative case. So we have die Frau, nominative case, meines Bruders, of my brother. That es at the end of mein indicates genitive masculine, and we add an s to the end of Bruder because it's got more than one syllable and it's masculine, so we just add s as opposed to es. Okay? Dem Sohn is the son in the dative case, followed by the genitive case eines Lehrers. Eines has the es again at the end of it because this is a masculine teacher, and we added just an s to the end of the noun because again it is a two-syllable word, Lehrer, two syllables, and so we just add s. Eines Käfers, same thing, also a masculine noun, ends in an s here because it is again more than one syllable. Die Fenster eines Hauses können die Effizienz eines Heizungssystems beeinflussen. So, die Fenster eines Hauses, the windows of a house, eines Hauses, because the single syllable word house now has an es at the end, and it's neuter in the genitive case, so we use eines. Die Effizienz eines Heizungssystems. I keep forgetting the extra s. Eines Heizungssystems. There we go, got it right that time. But this one has an s at the end because obviously Heizungssystems is much longer than just one syllable. Okay? Feminine and plural examples. Die Geschichte seiner Flucht ist sehr beeindruckend. The story of his escape is very impressive. Das Auto meiner Eltern steht vor dem Haus meiner Freunde. Again, here we have meiner Eltern for the plural and the genitive case, and meiner Freunde in the genitive case as well. As I mentioned before, we have that side note of those possessive articles. You can use these possessive articles as possessive pronouns, which is something slightly different. So, ich habe ein Hemd gefunden. I found a shirt. Das ist meins. That is mine. Okay? This is slightly different, okay? These are pronouns replacing a noun, which means that in this case we're talking about ein Hemd, a shirt, which is a neuter noun. And the neuter ending in the nominative case here is using the s at the end of if you look at the accusative case, that s at the end of the accusative neuter form, that s there is indicating the case and gender here, and we're using it as if it were a pronoun. Now, normally whenever you use a possessive in the accusative for a neuter noun, you don't have an ending at all. It would just be mein. So, das ist mein Hemd. But because we're using this as a pronoun, now we have an s. Okay? And I mention this because in the genitive case, we now have meines, which is sometimes confused with meins. And those two things are definitely not the same. If you were to say meines as a pronoun, you need to use this with the genitive case, which means that you need to indicate in some way that that is something in genitive. So you could use this with like a genitive preposition more likely. So you could say like wegen meines, like because of mine. But anyway, the point is that's a little bit more explanation of the weirdness that is possessive articles or possessive pronouns. Adjective endings. Instead of giving you a full chart of all of the adjective endings for der words and ein words and then non-preceded, I just boiled it down to only the genitive case now, so you can look at exactly what you need to look at for this presentation. So here we have the der words, they all have en at the end of the adjective. So it's des hübschen Mannes, der klugen Frau, des kleinen Mädchens. Also that S there at the end of it should be in purple. Oops. And der alten Männer. Notice that at the end of the adjective, each one of them ends in en. The same thing happens in the genitive form here, where we have eines hübschen Mannes, einer klugen Frau, eines kleinen Mädchens, keiner alten Männer. So again, all of the adjectives in the genitive case use an en if there is an ein word or an indefinite article in front of them. Then we get into the genitive case if it is non-preceded, and you'll see the two yellow ones there. Those are highlighted because they are not the same as the der word endings. So I mention this because in normal adjective ending charts and stuff, they'll tell you that the adjective endings for non-preceded adjectives are the same as the der words, and they're mostly correct, except instead of having s at the end of the adjective for the genitive case and masculine things, we now just have an en. However, the feminine and the plural still has an er. So guten Käses, frischer Milch, grünen Gemüses. That one should have an S highlighted in purple there as well. And then alter Männer, so of old men. So those are your adjective endings. I would go through some examples of that, but I thought that that would be a little bit tedious in this video, and I have other things that need to be talked about. So we're going to move straight on into the genitive prepositions. Genitive prepositions, there are a ton of them. There are some popular ones, which are the ones that are usually going to show up in somebody's textbook. These 5, or if you consider anstatt and anstelle to be the same thing, then there's only 4 here, but 5 actual words. And those are the popular ones, and then we'll get to some obscure ones here in a little bit. But anstatt means instead of. So instead of this, we have that. Anstelle, in place of. So if something is there, but we put something else in place of that, then that's anstelle. The only difference between anstatt and anstelle is this very tiny little change. So anstatt can be kind of an abstract thing, whereas anstelle has to have some place that it could be in. You know what I mean? So like you can put some word in place of another word, that's anstelle. You can put a plate in place of another plate. So you take one plate away and you put this new one in there. That would be anstelle. But if you're doing something that's a little bit more abstract, you're going to be forced into having anstatt. Now, if you can use anstatt, you can more than likely use anstelle, but it's not going to work the other way around. If you need anstelle, you need anstelle. You can't get around that by using anstatt. Trotz means in spite of or despite. Während means during, and wegen means because of. So, examples of anstatt. Anstatt is instead of. So we have here, anstatt eines Hundes bekomme ich eine Katze. Instead of a dog, I get a cat. Anstelle, in place of. Ich kaufe eine Zeitschrift anstelle eines Buches. I am buying a magazine instead of a book. Anstelle in this place is like in place of a magazine, slightly different than anstatt. Trotz, in spite of or despite. Trotz des Wetters spielen wir Fußball. In spite of the weather, we are playing soccer. Während. Während means during. So we have here, während des Spieles habe ich mich verletzt. Während des Spieles habe ich mich verletzt. Now, I mentioned that we have this parentheses here for an E, and that's because Spiel is one syllable and should technically take an ES at the end of it, but Most people are going to use an S at the end of this instead. So whenever you look this word up in Duden, you'll notice that in the genitive case, it does list both because they are both acceptable options for Spiel in the genitive case. So this is one of those exceptions to rules. Spieles or Spiels, both are acceptable. Wegen is because of. Wegen der Bedrohung ist dieser Straße abgeriegelt. Because of the threat, this street is cordoned off, meaning this street is not going to be open anymore because of a threat. Wegen der Bedrohung. Lesser used ones. As I mentioned, there are a ton of genitive prepositions, and these are some of the ones that you more than likely come across eventually. But if you're just beginning your German learning journey, you're probably not going to see these anytime soon. Okay? But we have innerhalb, inside of, außerhalb, outside of, oberhalb, above, unterhalb, under. There's a lot of halbs. Innerhalb, außerhalb, oberhalb, unterhalb. Then we have diesseits, this side of, jenseits, on the other side of, anlässlich, on the occasion of, Kraft, by virtue of. You might also notice the word Kraft does mean strength as well. And this kind of works with the way that this is used as a preposition. So we have Kraft, which is strength. So by virtue of, by the strength of this, the power that is vested in me because of this thing, by virtue of that. Laut, which is according to, and you may also recognize the word laut being loud. And loud is more referencing like because this thing is said out loud, according to whoever it is that said that, that's laut. Aufgrund, on the basis of or because of. Again, you might notice the word Grund, which means ground. So on the grounds of this in English. Seitens, on the part of. Seit is, or Seite is a side, so on the part of would be seitens. Makes sense. Bezüglich, with regard to. And now examples. Innerhalb, inside of. Rauchen ist innerhalb des Gebäudes verboten. Smoking is forbidden inside of the building. Außerhalb, outside of. Außerhalb des Gebäudes sollte man auch nicht rauchen. You shouldn't smoke outside the building either. This is just my friendly reminder that smoking will kill you. You should stop. Oberhalb, above. Die Sommerrodelbahn liegt auf dem Berg oberhalb der Stadt. The summer toboggan run is located on the mountain above the city. Oberhalb der Stadt. Unterhalb, under. Der Räuber grub unterhalb der Bank. The robber dug under the bank. Diesseits, this side of. Diesseits der Grenze ist Marihuana illegal. On this side of the border, marijuana is illegal. Jenseits, on the other side. Jenseits der Grenze kann man es legal kaufen. On the other side of the border, one can buy it legally. Anlässlich, on the occasion of. Anlässlich seines 100. Geburtstags flog nach Las Vegas. On the occasion of his 100th birthday, he flew to Las Vegas. Kraft, by virtue of. Kraft des Gesetzes sollten wir nicht ohne Grund ins Gefängnis. By virtue of the law, we shouldn't go to jail without cause. Laut, according to. Laut des Wetterberichts sollte es morgen regnen. According to the weather forecast, it is supposed to rain tomorrow. Aufgrund, on the basis of, because of. Flamingos sind aufgrund ihres Futters pink. Flamingos are pink because of their food. Whenever I was looking up example sentences to use for this, I came across this exact sentence online, and I was like, I have to use this sentence now because I did not know that, and I think everyone should know that flamingos are actually gray, and then when they eat stuff, they become pink. So, born gray, become pink. It's an odd little thing that happens in nature, and I thought it needed to be shared, so there it is. Seitens, on the part of. Es gab eine große Demonstration seitens der Opposition. There was a large demonstration on the part of, or on the side of, the opposition. Bezüglich, with regard to. Der Bewerber hat ein paar Fragen bezüglich des Vorstellungsgesprächs. The applicant has a few questions with regards to the interview. Weak nouns. I've mentioned this in every presentation about cases that I have talked about so far. And then we have these weak nouns. Basically what happens is, in every case that is not nominative, they take N or sometimes EN at the end of these nouns. Not any good reason behind it. There is a little bit of logic, but not much. So things like der Neffe, in the accusative, they become den Neffen. In the dative, it's dem Neffen. And in the genitive, it's des Neffen. Okay? Now, occasionally, you will add that extra S at the end of them as well, but this is really, really occasionally. So, like, not very often you will see that extra S. In fact, I only have one example that I have on the next slide where I give you example sentences with these things in the genitive. Okay? This is normally just an EN. And I mention this because these are all masculine nouns. So, putting them into the genitive case makes them all des, and you would expect that to be followed by a noun that ends in an S as well, and that just doesn't happen. So, yeah, that's just another thing that you got to be aware of, because weak nouns are weird. Der Hund meines Neffen heißt Struppi. The dog of my nephew is called Struppi. For anybody who uses the Deutsch Aktuell book, that is the textbook that we use at my high school. And in that book, there is a really terrible cartoon strip called Willi und Milli. And in there, in the very first episode, they introduce you to a dog who has the name Struppi. So there's a random message for those people. So, die Bekanntheit seines Namens ist seine Superkraft. The prominence of his name is his superpower. This is the only example that I have on here that ends in an EN because of that weak noun rule, but then has an extra S at the end of that on top of that because we have here the genitive case. So like I said, it is pretty rare, but the word Name is not rare, and so it should be noted here that we have these words. Der echte Name des Helden ist nicht bekannt. The real name of the hero is not known. Der Rüssel des Elefanten ist sehr lang. The trunk of the elephant is very long. Now, if you're looking for ways to figure out what these weak nouns are and how to identify them, they are always masculine nouns that most of them end with an E. There are also a lot of people on this list as well, but they are mostly masculine nouns that end with E and are people or animals. So Neffe, Junge, Franzose, Hase, Affe, and so on. Then, they are also a lot of nouns with Latin or Greek endings such as ent, Assistent, Emigrant, Kapitalist, Diplomat, Astronaut, and Kamerad. All of those end in some sort of Latin or Greek ending, and so those will also take an en if they are in the case that is not nominative, so in this case genitive. And there's also a few single-syllable masculine nouns as well, so Bär, Christ, Mensch, Prinz, Narr. Odd ones that are just single-syllable, happen to be masculine nouns. They also take an en or just an n. Question words. This came up in all of my other case system presentations, and today is no different. Today we're talking about the one that goes with the genitive case, obviously. So here we have all of the other ones I've talked about, and then examples using wessen, which is the new one. So if you were asking about a person in the nominative case, you use the question word wer, which is who. In the accusative case, we use the word wen to ask about a person. When it becomes dative, we now use wem, which is the dative form of the same thing. And then if we're talking about the genitive case, we need wessen, which in English we translate as whose. Now, it is not important that you know that the word wessen is genitive. It is only important when you get to the genitive case used in the answer to those questions, because when you replace the question word wessen, you should be replacing it with something that is genitive. So, for instance, wessen Hemd ist das? Whose shirt is that? Das ist das Hemd meines Bruders. That is the shirt of my brother. For some reason, of my brother is not in purple. It should be, and meines Bruders should be in purple as well, because the whole point of this is to show you that when whose is removed from that sentence, the only thing that is left now is the other thing that should be in purple. I did a better job of doing my color coordination in the next sentence, though. Wessen Brief liest du? Whose book are you reading? Ich lese F. Scott Fitzgerald's Buch. In this case, we have an S at the end of this person's name because he's the one who wrote the book, and therefore he is in the genitive case, therefore purple. Demonstrative and relative pronouns in the genitive case. So most of the time, relative and demonstrative pronouns are the exact same thing as the definite articles. As you can see in the nominative and accusative case, they are literally exactly the same. So der, die, das, die, same as the der words. Accusative, den, die, das, die. Same thing as the normal definite articles. Dative case is mostly the same, dem, der, dem, and then we get the new one, denen, in the dative plural. Now, in the genitive case, they are all different. None of them seem to make any real logical sense, and so we kind of have to remember which ones are what. Luckily for us, they are basically just two, because neuter and masculine take the same form, dessen, and the feminine and plural take the same form, deren. Now, if you don't know, relative pronouns are pronouns that it basically looks like a der word, but refers to something that was in the previous clause, and they are then used in a relative clause, meaning that it's a clause where the verb is at the end of this sentence, or at the end of the clause, depending on the case, and the only difference between a relative pronoun and a demonstrative pronoun is that demonstrative pronouns are not inside of relative clauses, meaning that they can be set in their own little sentence, but they are referring to something that was already previously said. Few examples of how you can use these. The weird thing that happens about the genitive one is that we still need to use, like in English, the word whose in order to use this. But now we are referring back to whatever the thing was before the comma. So here we have der Junge, and since der Junge is masculine, we use dessen as our word. So even though Haare is plural, it's not relevant for this particular sentence because dessen is referring back to the boy, which is a masculine noun. So der Junge, dessen Haare blau sind, spielt den ganzen Tag Computerspiele. So the boy, the subject of that clause, if you just leave out the relative clause, nothing happens. So, der Junge spielt den ganzen Tag Computerspiele. That's a normal sentence. The other part here is dessen Haare blau sind. This is a clause that's called a relative clause because it refers back to der Junge and gives us more information about him. So in order to use that with the genitive case, we need dessen to refer back to the boy. He's the one who owns the hair, which is why we use here the genitive case to begin with. Now, if we use a feminine noun such as die Frau, we have deren as our genitive relative pronoun. So, die Frau, deren Mann gestorben ist, hat heute viel zu tun. So, the woman whose husband died has a lot to do today. Again, if you take out the relative clause, whose husband died, you're going to have a normal sentence. So, the woman has a lot to do today. Die Frau hat heute viel zu tun. If you use der Mann ist gestorben, that's a full sentence as well, but we're using this as a relative clause to describe the woman, which is why we have deren Mann gestorben ist, whose man or husband died. More examples. Der Polizist fährt mit dem Mädchen, dessen Eltern verschwunden sind, zur Polizeiwache. So the police officer drives with the girl whose parents disappeared to the police station. In this case, we have Mädchen, which is a neuter noun, and so when we refer to that in the genitive case, we need dessen. Dessen referring back to Mädchen and shows us possession of the parents in that clause. Die Kinder, deren Schokolade schon gegessen wurde, wissen nicht, wer sie gegessen hat. The children, whose chocolate has already been eaten, don't know who ate it. So deren refers back to the children, which is why we use here deren for the possessive here. This possessive shows us whose chocolate it is. It is the children, but we're using this within a relative clause, so we are required to use this relative pronoun deren. Now, the topic that people were saying in the comments that I had forgotten in the last one, which is the reason that I know that the streaming program that I use just decided to stop showing things after the 30th slide. These are genitive verbs. If you ask anyone, like, how to use the genitive case, they're almost never going to say genitive verbs because no one remembers that they're a thing. And honestly, I don't think I've ever used a genitive verb except to explain how genitive case works to anyone ever for any reason. They're basically not necessary. There are other ways to say things. They're almost always like an elevated speech or kind of a little bit too academic almost for each of these verbs. They just seem a little bit, I don't know, the word hoity-toity comes to mind, just too far out there. So I generally don't use them, but they do exist, and so you should know that they do exist. So, sich enthalten, for example, to refrain from or abstain. Sich bedienen, to make use of or employ. Gedenken, which is to think of or commemorate. And bedürfen, to be in need of. Technically speaking, these are all genitive verbs. These verbs require the genitive case. Now, that being said, a lot of native speakers in German will use the accusative case with this, and they will kind of switch off the genitive case in each of these. Now for some examples, sich enthalten, which is to refrain from or abstain. Der Politiker enthält sich der Stimme. The politician abstains from voting. Sich in here is just kind of a reflexive. It's reminding you that it's the politician. For some reason that's reflexive in German. In English it's not. But der Stimme is used here in the genitive case. And the reason that you see der Stimme, that's genitive feminine, and Stimme is feminine. You may hear people say that this means that it's actually dative, but if you put in a neuter noun in that, you're going to end up with des, whatever that happens to be. So this is in fact genitive. Sich bedienen, to make use of. Bill Nye bedient sich der Wissenschaft, uns zu begeistern. Bill Nye makes use of science to inspire us. Der Wissenschaft here is science, and that's our object of our genitive verb, sich bedienen. So that one again is genitive. Now to show you these with some masculine and neuter nouns so that you kind of see that they are in fact genitive. Gedenken, to think of or commemorate. There we go, English words. Die ganze Nation gedenkt des Jahrestags des Anschlags. Two genitive things in a row. The first one is genitive because it's the object of this genitive verb gedenken, and the other one is genitive because it's showing possession of the Jahrestag, or the anniversary here. So the entire nation commemorates the anniversary of the attack. The anniversary is your object of your genitive verb commemorate. Bedürfen, to be in need of. So, sie bedürft nur eines Trotzes. She is only in need of comfort or consolation. Ein Trotz, Trost, that is, Trost is the word for comfort or consolation, and eines Trostes is then the genitive form of that for bedürft. Again, some people will use the accusative case here, so instead, sie bedürft nur ein Trotz, Trost, that is, or die ganze Nation gedenkt den Jahrestag des Anschlags. So again, accusative case for a lot of native speakers, but genitive case, technically speaking, is what is supposed to be used here. Now, there are certain things that are used with genitive case, just like you saw with the dative case, where there are certain kind of adjectives that are used with the genitive case for some reason. We're doing that now with the genitive, not the dative. So, ist seines Erfolgs gewiss. He is confident of his success. Gewiss is the word confident, and if you are confident of something, then that something is genitive in German because of the adjective gewiss. Ist seines Erfolgs gewiss. Ich bin mir seines Verrats bewusst. I am aware of his betrayal. Aware is bewusst, and seines Verrats is then the genitive case because of that word bewusst. Dieser Mann ist des Mordes schuldig. This is probably the most common one that you're going to come across. If someone is guilty of something, that something is genitive because of the word schuldig. So of the murder in this case, des Mordes. Certain phrases are also used with this. That's not necessarily an adjective of sorts, but you'll kind of get the idea from this first one. Mein Schwiegervater fliegt immer erster Klasse. My father-in-law always flies first class. First class here is a feminine noun, and in the genitive case that makes it erster Klasse. So here we have genitive case just because it's first class, and that phrase itself is used in the genitive case for some reason. Seine Tochter ist heute guter Laune. His daughter is in a good mood today. Guter Laune has an ER at the end of the gut because, again, this phrase happens to be used in the genitive case. Think of it as the fact that, like, heute is in the accusative case in that sentence, just because that's how it's used. Same thing happens with gute Laune. Wir sind festen Glaubens, dass wir gewinnen werden. We are of firm faith that we will win. Festen Glaubens is kind of a fixed phrase of sorts, meaning that it's just a phrase that is used in the genitive case because it's that way. Festen Glaubens, so a firm faith. And remember that the certain nouns that you're going to add an S to the end of it, that's because it's genitive. That's the reason that it's not festem Glaubens. That would be like dative case there, but this is genitive, festen Glaubens. Now, that is the end of our presentation, except I do have a few other things that I need to talk about, because if you look at this slide here, where it says indefinite time, there are things that I did not talk about because I didn't mention indefinite time on this list of stuff. So I need to explain to you how indefinite time works in German. So basically what happens is, I don't have a slide for this, and I apologize for that. If you do the $5 super chat, or you buy it later on my website on germanwithantrim.com, you'll have stuff about the indefinite time once that's up there, because I don't have a slide for it for some reason. But basically what happens is you use the genitive case with things that are not specific times. So like every day I go for a walk. Jeden Tag laufe ich. Or jeden Tag gehe ich spazieren. If those are the case, you use jeden Tag because that is accusative and masculine, and jeden indicates that. Now that is definite time. That's every single day. Okay? If I'm talking about someday my prince will come, I'm going to say eines Tages. Eines Tages kommt mein Prinz. Someday my prince will come. Eines Tages kommt mein Prinz. That's genitive case. That's what we call indefinite time. It's not a specific time, but someday, or one day I woke up. Eines Tages wache ich auf und ich werde ein Käfer. I don't know. One day I wake up and I became a beetle. Yeah, anyway. So, point is, that is indefinite time, eines Tages, eines Jahres, any of those type of things, okay? That is the only thing that I missed off of the presentation. For some reason, I just didn't make a slide for that, and I apologize for those people who were looking forward to that. But let's go ahead and take a look over here at the live chat and see if you guys had any questions while I was going on and on about all of the stuff in the genitive case. So Germany Travel and Personal Guide says, Hallo, ich liebe Deutschland. I am not fluent at all. Thanks for what you do. You are very welcome. I'm glad you joined us for today. Vis-a-vis, Vis says, I'm trying to learn Deutsch for almost a year now, but it's difficult as hell. Yes, it is. I'm sorry that it's difficult. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but the way I see it is I look at German as a puzzle. You have to figure out where each of the little pieces go, and sometimes you got to turn things around, you got to move things, you got to change things just a little bit, and then once you find out how puzzle pieces work together, you can do puzzles better. So to me, German has this quality behind it that, you know, this piece always works like this, and this piece always works like this. And so once I know these things, I'm getting better at understanding puzzles later on whenever I get to more of them. So once I understand the accusative case, the dative case isn't that difficult. It's not that big of a stretch for me to understand how that works. Once I understand the dative case, the genitive case is not that big of a stretch for me to understand that one. And so I see German as, yes, it is kind of difficult, but it's a puzzle, and those puzzles can be figured out, and you can get better at it, and that's the encouragement that I would give you. Morlöwen wants to know if I'm going to explain the Saxony version of the genitive, in which case I don't know anything about the Saxony way of doing things for the genitive case. I would have to have been in Saxony at some point, and I have not ever actually traveled to Saxony. I don't know anything about that, so if you would like to explain that in the comments, I would be glad to hear about it, because I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, so good luck with that, Morlöwen. You can explain it in the comments if you want. Hi, meine Frau ist Australien und lernt jetzt Deutsch. So hi, my wife is Australian and she is learning German now. That is awesome news. I think everyone should learn German at some point. I think it's good for you, especially if you're an English speaker. You need to know kind of where your language came from and why your grammar is the way that it is. And it works out really well if you learn German, because then you can learn more about the English language as well. Sie lebt schon 5 Jahre in Deutschland, mit dem Deutsch hapert es aber noch. So she's lived in Germany for 5 years, and she's still hobbling along with the German. Yeah, some people, it takes a little bit of time, but you will eventually get it. I would say that, you know, you should probably be putting a little bit more effort into it. I would think after 5 years of being in Germany, you should do relatively well. But if you're speaking English at home, if you are speaking English with people that you see out in stores and stuff like that, that could be kind of contributing to the lack of knowledge in the German language. So I would encourage her to practice a little bit more and put more of a conscious effort into getting that into your brain, basically. So Mateus Batalini says, it's worth noting that salmon also gets its color from what it eats. That is fascinating. I did not know that, and I'm glad you shared that. Now I know 2 things that are pink-ish, and it's because apparently they eat things that make them pinkish. DJ Louisa N wants to know if I have a video about common phrases that people say in German weddings. I do have a video that is about German wedding vows, and let's see if I can find that real quick. German wedding vows. Herr Antrim. If you ever want to find a video, by the way, of me, just search for Herr Antrim behind whatever topic it is. I probably have a video for that. I'm up to like 740 videos at this point on my YouTube channel, so I've probably made a video at some point about whatever topic it is that you want. There's that link there. That will take you to the video that I made of German wedding vows. It's a really long video, but it does go through several varieties of the different types of wedding vows. That's going to be the closest I get to phrases that people use at weddings, which is basically me saying that I can't tell you in this video how to congratulate somebody in a wedding situation, but yeah, I can point you in the direction of at least the wedding vows for right now, and maybe I'll use that idea as a video later on. So for instance, if you're going to say like happy wedding or like congratulations on your wedding, you could say like Glückwunsch, which is just well-wishing in general. Alles Gute zur Hochzeit would be another one. Everything good for your wedding, basically. But yeah, I don't have a video about that yet. I would have to put together something, so maybe I will do that in the future. Morlöwen has come up with a explanation here of the sächsische Genitiv. Pauls Auto statt das Auto des Pauls oder Vaters Bart statt der Bart des Vaters. Aha. Okay. Paul's Auto is not different than the normal version, so I don't know how that's an example of anything. You wouldn't say das Auto des Pauls. That was the example that I gave earlier. That's less common, I would say das Auto des Pauls than it would be to say Paul's Auto. As far as Vaters Bart instead of Bart des Vaters, that is a version that I have not heard, and that I would expect to be the sächsische way of saying things then. LHN Lim wants to, or MH Lim, there we go, says, is it true that the genitive case is not very common when speaking? You see this mainly in written text. I would say it's not as common as it once was, maybe. For instance, with the prepositions I gave examples of earlier with like wegen and wären, a lot of people will use the dative case with those instead of using the genitive case. So you'll have like wegen dem or wären dem instead of using des. And I think that this, my personal opinion, I haven't done any research into this, so don't hold me to this, but my personal opinion is that it came from people not recognizing how to use the genitive case, and so they're just seeing der after wegen or während, and so they assume it's dative because that also happens in dative, and then it just kind of evolved into more and more people doing this. That being said, it is still very commonly used. I don't want to say that it's not used in speaking, because it definitely is. In fact, I watched a video one time of a guy who was explaining how the genitive case is dying and you shouldn't even bother learning it anymore. And in the video explaining how the genitive case is dying, he used the genitive case on multiple occasions, not as an example of how you should use the genitive case if you were to use it, but using the genitive case as like his explanation of how the genitive case isn't used, which doesn't make any sense. It is clearly still being used. It is clearly still necessary for you to learn as a German learner. And I think that it's one of those things that, yeah, you can get away with sometimes not using it, but eventually you're going to come across a time when you need the genitive case and you just can't express yourself without using the genitive case. And so to those people who think that the genitive case is dying out, I would say that's a naive worldview. Yeah, sure, it might be dying out, but not in your lifetime. So you're going to be dead before the genitive case is, and you should think of things in terms of that. Think of it as, you need this now. You don't need the genitive case in 200 years, but you also don't need any of your German skills in 200 years. You're going to be dead. Morlöwen would say that spoken language uses the genitive, uses the dative instead of the genitive, and that would be correct, as I mentioned. DJ Louisa N says, thank you. I will be D-I-J-I-N-G. I will be doing a German-Mexican wedding, and I would love to know a few phrases. So yeah, that video that I sent you would at least give you the vowels. So let's see, what else do we have? Could you teach German word order? I do have a ton of videos about the German word order. Let's see if I can get the playlist to come up here. German word order. I've got a playlist, which I'll link here in the chat. That playlist there. That playlist is nothing but genitive, or not genitive, I'm stuck on the genitive. It's nothing but word order in German. These are all part of my 3 Minuten Deutsch series, which was a series of videos that are meant to be shorter grammar lessons that are just like bite-sized German lessons. And I haven't done those in a while. I need to get back into those because people seem to really like them. But those lessons are all put together in 21 videos about the German word order stuff. And I think that may be the only playlist I now have about that. Let's see here, playlist. Yeah, that looks like the only playlist that's really going to be helpful for you guys at this point. But yeah, that's German word order. So that should help you out. Yeah, like I said, if anybody has any questions, now that the video is about to end, you can leave those in the normal comments instead of in the live chat, and we can talk about it in the discussion down there. But yeah, that's kind of all I got. So if you want extra materials for this, you can check those out on GermanWithAntrim.com. I will be uploading those within a week or so. I will have my extra materials to go with this. And for those of you who are interested in one of those super chats, you've only got a few more seconds before I sign off, and the ability to send off a super chat is gone. But those people who do $5 or more on that will go ahead and get those things once I have them done and uploaded. So thank you all very much for your attention today. Thank you for joining me on this live stream, and leave in the comments, not the live chat, but in the comments down below, what you would like to see in the next German masterclass, because I have done accusative, dative, and genitive now, and the present tense. So we now need to find out what to do next, because I've done all of the cases. I don't really think that the nominative case really needs a whole hour-long video about it. So if you need something other than that, that you would like me to spend an hour just dissecting to each individual minute detail, go ahead and leave that in the comments, and I will see which one of those ideas I like best for next month's live stream. Thank you very much, and I'm out of here. Cheers!